Say good morning to Jayson Stark, who's with us today, and talk about the Hall of Fame. Jayson, first of all, how many years have you been voting in Cooperstown? What is this for you?
That's a good question, Matt. It was sometime in the 90s, so like 30-ish.
It was in the 90s when you were responsible for that very fine back page in Baseball America magazine. And before the interwebs, we would all rip off your stuff and use it on the air uncredited.
You're welcome.
We credit it.
We being Matt.
But my point is that Jayson is one of the, he's, without dating Jayson, he's been doing this dance longer than just about any of us whose name isn't Peter Gammons. So it is with that skin in the game and with that perspective that I ask you to reveal, Jayson, your Hall of Fame ballot.
Wow, you're putting heat on you right away.
I'm ready for you guys. I have a column in The Athletic this morning revealing my 2022 Hall of Fame ballot. And just so you guys know, I try to stay consistent. If I vote for you one year, it means I think you're a Hall of Famer. And so unless something extraordinary happens, I'm going to vote for you every year. So I've got 8 players who I voted for last year: Bonds, Clemens, Schilling, Rowland, Helton, Wagner, Sheffield, and Kent. And then my 2 first-timers, David Ortiz, we can talk about him in a moment. The other was Jimmy Rollins, who I'll admit I voted for to make sure that he stayed on the ballot. We've had way too many one-and-dones, I think, who fell off our ballot too quickly. I didn't want Jimmy Rollins to be one of them. He's a guy who's had a unique set of credentials. No shortstop in history has had the career that Jimmy Rollins has had, and yet the metrics would say he's not a Hall of Famer. I think it's important that he gets some time on the ballot so we can have a debate.
No, I like that with Jimmy Rollins. I think you start looking at him, he becomes a Hall of Famer the more you dissect it. You said unless something was extraordinary, you don't change. So I want to ask you this. This is extraordinary, because last year Schilling said, "Don't vote for me, I don't care." But yet you still voted for him. So that's the one I want to pick on for a second.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we can't stop talking about Curt Schilling. It's his last year in the ballot. And, I just try to tell people we're not voting for him for mayor. We're voting for the Hall of Fame. And it's not the Hall of Twitter. It's the Baseball Hall of Fame. And Curt Schilling had a Hall of Fame career. I covered him. I know him well. And I'm one of those people who thinks I'm just going to tune out the noise and vote on a guy who was clearly above that Hall of Fame line when I watched him play.
I would agree with you on that one. Here's another question I have for you about your ballot. You have Bonds and Clemens in the final year of eligibility, right? We have the PED discussion around them. It's hard to get away from it. There are other players also linked into that same category that you did not vote for this year. Why did you make that distinction?
Well, Matt, I think if you look how hundreds of voters are voting, they're drawing a clear line between one half of the quote-unquote PED era and another half. Guys who played most or all of their careers before there was testing and discipline fall into one category. Guys who played most of their career after testing, that's a separate category. And so Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, look, they served their time. They're multi-time offenders. We judge them differently because we know what they did. Before that, before testing, we're playing this massive guessing game that, frankly, we're not any good at. So, I can't say it makes you feel good to vote for players who you suspect did something or other, but we can't keep all the cheaters out of the Hall of Fame because we don't know for a fact who did what. So I have chosen to vote for the very best players of that era. In the case of Bonds and Clemens, maybe the best hitter and pitcher of the last 100 years. And if they ever get elected, which they're not on our ballot, let the Hall of Fame decide how it wants to handle that, because we're not any good at that.
So Jayson, this is very difficult to do, and probably probably can't do, but let's take you back in history. And I want to ask you the biggest challenge. Would it have been more of a challenge to vote for, say, Shoeless Joe Jackson back in his day than the steroid era? Because there's so much that we don't know on all the things you just described. So what do you think would be the most difficult? I know writers didn't do it back then, but what do you think? I love history.
I want to clear this up. I was not a voter when Shoeless Joe Jackson came under consideration.
If I was a writer, I'd be dangerous.
So I never have really confronted how I would vote on Shoeless Joe Jackson, but you know, there are times that you don't vote for a player because you're waiting for more information. I think Shoeless Joe getting wrapped up in the Black Sox scandal, there's a very good chance he would have fallen in that category from me. It would have been a wait and see type matter, but throw the idea that you threw World Series games versus you used PEDs. These are two very different issues, don't you think, Harold?
Yeah, that's why it's very difficult. But those are the two things I think in history that kind of stand out as to why guys aren't there. Obviously, Pete Rose would fall into the gambling category as maybe Shoeless Joe. So, I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, we're not looking at their. They're not looking at any sabermetrics.
The whole on base thing, it's hogwash in a sense.
In a sense.